The settlement check was for $4.2 million. My attorney, David Okafor, a soft-spoken man who chose his words the way surgeons choose instruments, slid it across the conference table without a single word, and I sat there staring at those 7 digits for what felt like a full minute. My coffee going cold at my elbow, thinking about my son Marcus's face pressed against the car window, his small fists slapping the glass, screaming, "Daddy! Daddy!" While 2 uniformed officers had me face down on the hood of my own Volvo on my own street on an ordinary Saturday morning in June. I had done nothing wrong, not one single thing. But that day, I learned something I had always known and spent a decade trying to convince myself wasn't as true as it felt. It started, as most Saturdays in our house did, with pancakes. Marcus was 7 that summer. He had his mother's eyes, pale gray-green, the color of shallow water, and Sarah's blonde curls, which she had passed along with what seemed like genetic stubbornness, since no amount of combing could tame them. He had my chin and my laugh, loud and unguarded, the kind that makes strangers smile in grocery stores without knowing why. Sarah was white. I am black. Marcus was our biological son, a fact that required no explanation, but nonetheless invited a particular category of double-take wherever we went. Over 11 years of marriage, I had cataloged those glances. The quick look at Marcus, the quick look at me, the recalibration, the stiffening or softening depending on the person. I had learned to absorb them. I told myself I had learned not to let them matter. That morning, I believed it. I had not yet had my coffee. I remember that detail with ridiculous precision, the way you remember absurd small things from the worst days of your life. My mug was still on the kitchen counter, half full, when everything happened. Sarah had driven to her sister's in Connecticut the night before for a baby shower weekend. She'd kissed me at the door and told me not to let Marcus eat cereal for every meal. I'd laughed and said no promises. So it was just the 2 of us. Marcus had consumed his body weight in maple syrup and was now running circuits around the kitchen island in his indoor soccer cleats, which he refused to remove even indoors. And I had told him that if he could survive 2 hours at the hardware store without making me age a decade, there would be ice cream afterward. He'd thrown his arms around my waist and announced I was the best dad in the world. A verdict I suspected was less about genuine appreciation and more about securing the soft serve. I accepted it anyway. We were going to build a birdhouse together, a project we'd been postponing for 3 weeks. He'd picked out the wood stain himself, barn red. We had the whole afternoon. We lived on Birchwood Lane in Maplewood, a quiet street of colonials with oversized hydrangea bushes and neighbors who knew each other's dogs by name. 4 years we'd been there. Tom next door lent me his table saw on a standing basis and showed up unannounced with cold beer and opinions about my gutters. His wife Carol brought Marcus dinosaur-shaped cookies at every holiday, with the seriousness of a diplomat delivering state gifts. I coached Marcus's soccer team on Sunday mornings. I attended the neighborhood association meetings and voted for the park renovations and paid my mortgage on time every month, and drove a dark blue Volvo station wagon that was 3 years old and utterly unremarkable in every conceivable way. None of that was going to matter. We were 2 blocks from home, stopped at the light on Cranberry Avenue. Marcus in the back seat narrating an elaborate game involving 2 action figures and an invisible city, when I registered the patrol car behind me. It had been there for 4 blocks. I'd clocked it automatically, without thinking, the way I always noticed police vehicles. That reflex was not driving technique. My father had installed it in me at 16, standing in our driveway the day I got my license, telling me things that no teenager should have to hear. but that every black man in America already knows by then. Hands visible. Move slowly. Announce every action before you make it. Don't reach for anything without saying what you're doing first. I hadn't understood then how many times I would use those instructions. I understood now. The lights came on just past the intersection. A cold weight settled into my chest before the conscious thought even arrived. A kind of anticipatory dread that moved through my body like ice water, arriving in my sternum before my brain had finished processing the red and blue in the mirror. I signaled immediately. I pulled smoothly to the right and came to a complete stop in front of a white Colonial with an American flag hanging by the door. Hands at 10 and 2. In the rear view, I watched two officers climb out of the cruiser. The one walking toward my window already had his hand resting near his holster. Not gripping it, just resting, the way you rest a hand on a door you're planning to open. "License and registration," he said. No greeting, no explanation for the stop. He was young, mid-20s, with a jaw like a bracket and a sunburn that went all the way to his hairline. His partner had taken position near my rear quarter panel, exactly where I couldn't see him without turning my head. "Of course," I said. "I'm going to reach into the glove compartment for the registration. My wallet is in my back right pocket. I'll move slowly." Those words came out the way they always did. Rehearsed, precise, each one placed like a step on ice. I had been saying them, in that exact order, since before I could vote. He watched me retrieve both documents without any change in expression. He took them without looking at them. 1 second, maybe 2. Then he handed them both to his partner, without reading a single word. "Step out of the vehicle." Something went very quiet inside me. Not fear exactly. Something older than fear, something that had no name because the people who felt it had learned to stop naming it out loud. "Can I ask what this is about?" I said, keeping my voice completely level. I don't believe I was speeding and... "Sir, step out of the vehicle." "Sir." Said the way you say a word you've drained of all meaning. I got out slowly, hands where both officers could see them. And the moment my feet touched the pavement, I felt the full exposure of it. The open air, the quiet residential street, the neighbors' houses with their closed windows, the flag by the Colonial door, the complete, ordinary silence of a Saturday morning in June that was about to become something else entirely. The second officer, older, thick gray mustache, mirrored sunglasses that reflected back a distorted, smaller version of me, moved around to my side without a word. The first was already on his radio. I heard him recite my plate number. And then I heard something that sent a current of electricity straight down my spine and into my feet. Possible stolen vehicle. The Volvo I had owned for 3 years. The Volvo with the parking decal for Marcus's school in the corner of the windshield, and the small dent on the rear bumper from a parking garage on 5th and Main. The Volvo I had purchased, financed, and made 38 consecutive on-time payments on without being late once. "That's my car," I said, completely evenly. "The registration is in your partner's hand. My name is on it. We received a call." "What kind of call? From who?" No answer. He told me to face the vehicle and place my hands flat on the hood. And then Marcus's door opened. He had unbuckled. Despite everything I had told him, he had unbuckled and pushed the door open, and his sneakers hit the asphalt, and his voice cut through the quiet street like something fracturing. "Daddy! What are they doing? Daddy!" "Get back in the car," the second officer said sharply, already moving toward him. And Marcus froze. He was 7 years old, and he had never in his life heard a stranger speak to him in that tone. and something in his small body understood it before his brain did. He went completely still in the middle of the road, standing there in his soccer cleats, eyes moving between me and the officers with an expression I have spent months trying to describe accurately and cannot. I have tried many times. I do not have the right words for what was on my son's face in that moment, and I am not sure those words exist. "Marcus," I said, and every remaining piece of myself went into keeping my voice calm and steady. "Go back in the car, baby. Right now. It's okay. I'm okay. I promise you I'm okay." My hands were flat on the warm metal of the hood. I did not move them. I did not turn around. I talked my son back into the car one word at a time while a man I had never met stood between us on a street where I had lived for 4 years, coached soccer, attended meetings, bought groceries, and built half a birdhouse I had not yet finished. What I did not know yet, what I would only learn 3 weeks later, through a Freedom of Information request that David Okafor filed the same day he took my case, was that both officers had been wearing body cams. Both cameras had been recording from the moment the lights came on. Every second, every word. The inside of my car, Marcus at the window, the hood, my hands, the street. All of it. What was on that footage was going to cost the city of Maplewood more than they had ever imagined paying. They put me in zip ties on my front lawn. That detail still catches in my throat when I say it, even now. Not in some distant parking lot, not on a highway outside of town. On Birchwood Lane, in front of the hydrangea bushes, 40 feet from my own front door, where the Sunday paper was still sitting in the plastic sleeve on the porch because I hadn't yet had time to pick it up. One of the officers pressed my wrists together behind my back, and I heard the plastic zip tie ratchet tight. And I remember thinking, with a strange, dissociated clarity, that I hadn't even had my coffee yet. That thought kept coming back. I don't know why. Maybe because it was the last completely ordinary thing I had been about to do. Marcus had stopped screaming by then. He was standing at the edge of the driveway in his soccer cleats, completely silent, watching. That silence was worse than the screaming. He was 7 years old, and he had gone very still the way animals go still when they understand they are in the presence of something dangerous. And the expression on his face, the way his green eyes moved between me and the officers, was not the expression of a child who is confused. It was the expression of a child who is learning something permanent. And I could not protect him from learning it. Carol from next door appeared on her porch. I saw her over the first officer's shoulder, one hand over her mouth. She was 63 years old and had known Marcus since he was 3 and used to bring him those dinosaur cookies. And now she was standing on her porch at 10:15 in the morning, watching 2 uniformed men zip-tie her neighbor on his own lawn. And she looked like she had stepped into a world that did not match any version of reality she had previously understood. "What is happening?" she called out, her voice shaking. "James? What is happening?" Neither officer answered her. The first one took my arm and walked me toward the cruiser without looking at me. The second one was still on his radio. I heard him mention the plate number again. And then I heard him pause. Then silence. Then, very quietly, talking into the radio again. They put me in the back of the car. Through the window, I watched Marcus standing at the end of the driveway. He hadn't moved. His cleats were too big for him. He always wore a size up because he said they ran faster that way. Which was not true, but which I had never had the heart to argue. And he was standing in them on the concrete in the Saturday morning light. And I pressed my face as close to the glass as I could and said his name. he looked up and saw me and took one step toward the car, and the second officer stepped between us. I sat in that back seat for 22 minutes. I know because I track time the way you track something you have no other control over. At minute 8, a third patrol car arrived. At minute 14, the second officer came back to my window and said they were confirming ownership of the vehicle. At minute 19, Carol went back inside her house. She came back out 2 minutes later. She was holding her phone. She was recording. I didn't know that at the time. I found out 3 days later when she came to the door with her husband Frank and a flash drive and stood in my kitchen with her eyes red and said, "I'm so sorry, James." I didn't know what else to do. I got as much as I could. She had recorded 11 minutes of footage from her porch, including the zip ties, including Marcus standing alone in the driveway, including the moment the first officer finally made a call on his phone. Not his radio, his personal phone. And turned away from the street and said something I couldn't make out, and then stood still for a moment and then said something else. That phone call was the thread that, when my attorney pulled it, unraveled everything. At minute 22, the first officer came back to the car and opened the door. He said the vehicle had been confirmed as mine. He cut the zip ties. He handed me back my license and registration without meeting my eyes, said I was free to go, and walked back toward his cruiser as if he had just concluded a routine traffic stop. No explanation, no apology, not a single word about why it had happened, where the call had come from, or what exactly they had been looking for. He got in the car. His partner got in the car. They drove away. I stood on my driveway with my hands in front of me, the white marks from the zip ties already fading, and Marcus ran into me so hard he nearly knocked me over. He had his arms around my waist and his face pressed against my chest, and I could feel him shaking. And I held him and looked at the end of the empty street where the cruiser had been and felt something settle into place inside me. Not rage. Not yet. Something quieter and colder and more determined than rage. I called Sarah from the kitchen while Marcus sat at the counter with a glass of orange juice, not drinking it, just holding it. Her voice went from confused to frightened to absolutely still in about 30 seconds. She said she was coming home. I told her to finish the shower weekend with her sister, that Marcus was okay, that I was okay, and that I had some calls to make. She said my name the way she does when she knows I'm not telling her everything. I said it again. "I'm okay. I'll call you tonight. Tell me what the baby shower was like." I then sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at nothing. That night, I didn't sleep. Marcus had finally gone down around 9, curled up in his bed with both his action figures tucked under the pillow. And I sat at the kitchen table with cold coffee and Carol's flash drive and my phone. And I looked up every civil rights attorney in a 40-mile radius. I wrote down 6 names. I crossed out 3 based on their websites alone. I circled 2, and at the top of the list, with 2 stars next to it, I wrote, David Okafor, Civil Rights, Police Misconduct, 15 years, New Jersey. I had found a case he'd won 3 years prior, a settlement of $850,000 for a man in Trenton who'd been unlawfully detained after a traffic stop. The city had tried to settle quietly. David had made it public. In the morning, I called him. He met me 4 days later in an office on the 6th floor of a building downtown that smelled of new carpet and old wood, which was an odd combination, but somehow reassuring. He was a trim, methodical man, with reading glasses on a chain and a habit of clicking his pen exactly twice before he began speaking. He watched Carol's footage on his laptop without expression. He watched it a second time. He asked me 3 questions, precise, clinical, the questions of someone who already knows which direction the answer is going to go. And then he set down his pen. We're going to file a FOIA request for the Bodycam footage from both officers, he said, with the calm of someone announcing the weather. And we're going to request the call log for the non-emergency line for that morning. All calls in the 4-hour window. You think there was no call? I said. He looked at me over the top of his reading glasses. I think the footage will tell us what there was, he said carefully. Then quieter. But between you and me? No. I don't think there was a call. The FOIA results came back in 21 days. David called me on a Tuesday evening while I was helping Marcus with a math worksheet, and I stepped into the hallway and listened while he read me the relevant points in his careful, even voice. And by the time he was done, I was sitting on the floor in the hallway with my back against the wall and the math worksheet forgotten on the kitchen table. The body cam footage from Officer Grant Riley, badge number 4417, showed him running my plates before he had even turned on his lights. The plate came back clean, registered, current, no flags whatsoever. He ran it a second time, also clean. He turned on his lights anyway. The call he made on his personal phone, visible in Carol's footage, was to a personal contact, not dispatch, not a supervisor. The non-emergency call log for that entire 4-hour window contained 0 calls about a stolen dark blue Volvo on Birchwood Lane or anywhere near it. There had been no call, not from anyone. Grant Riley had run my plates, found nothing, and pulled me over anyway. He had fabricated the stolen vehicle report on the spot, stated it to his partner out loud, on camera, knowing the body cam was running, either because he forgot it was on or because it had never once occurred to him that it would matter. And his partner, Officer Dale Ferris, badge number 4489, had heard it and said nothing, and positioned himself near my rear bumper and done everything he was asked to do. David filed the federal civil rights suit 8 days later. Violation of the Fourth Amendment, racial discrimination, false detention, emotional distress. And one additional count that he said was the one that would matter most in front of a jury. The deliberate falsification of a police report captured in full audio and video on government equipment by a government employee in uniform on duty. The city's first response was to offer $180,000 and a private apology. David sent back 3 words. We'll see you. The footage leaked 2 weeks before the deposition. I don't know how. David says he has his suspicions, but has never said them aloud. And within 48 hours, it was everywhere. The body cam video of Officer Riley running my plates, finding nothing, running them again, and pulling me over anyway. Carol's footage. Marcus standing alone in the driveway, me zip-tied, the quiet suburban street, the flag by the door. The 2 videos playing side by side on every news program that would run them. Marcus's voice. Daddy, Daddy. In Carol's audio, tinny and distant, became the sound clip that played under every segment. By the end of that week, 3 city council members had called for both officers to be suspended pending investigation. By the end of the following week, Officer Riley had been placed on administrative leave. Officer Ferris, whose personnel file, obtained by a journalist through a separate FOIA request, revealed 2 prior complaints for racially biased conduct that had been filed and then quietly closed, resigned before the department could act. The city's second offer was $1.1 million. David sent back the same 3 words. The deposition lasted 2 days. I sat across a table from the city's attorneys and answered every question in complete, accurate sentences. And when they attempted to suggest that the stop might have been triggered by a report that simply wasn't logged due to a dispatch error, David placed on the table a certified statement from the dispatch supervisor confirming that no such error had occurred and no such call had been made. The city's lead attorney looked at that statement for a long time. Then she made a note on her legal pad and asked for a recess. They settled 3 weeks later. $4.2 million. Both officers permanently barred from law enforcement in the state. A mandatory review of the Maplewood PD's traffic stop protocols, to be conducted by an independent civil rights organization and reported publicly. And one condition I had asked for myself, the one David had initially said was unusual, but ultimately included a formal, written, public letter of apology. Not a press release, not a statement from the mayor's office. A letter, signed, on department letterhead. It arrived the same day as the check. That was 8 months ago. Marcus is 8 now. He started 2nd grade in September and has a best friend named Theo who is also obsessed with soccer and who comes over every Saturday to play in the yard. He has not asked me about that morning in a direct way since the week after it happened, when he came to me one night at bedtime and sat on the edge of his mattress and said, very quietly, "Dad, did you do something wrong?" And I had sat down beside him and told him the truth, all of it, as much as a 7-year-old can hold. And he had listened with that focused, serious look he gets, his mother's look. And then he had nodded slowly and said, "That's not fair." And I had said, "No, buddy, it's not." And he had said, "Are you going to fix it?" And I had said, "I'm going to try." The birdhouse is finished. We built it the weekend after the settlement closed, barn red, exactly the color Marcus picked, with a crooked little roof because he insisted on hammering the last 3 nails himself. It's hanging in the oak tree in our backyard, and a pair of house sparrows moved into it in April. Marcus checks on them every morning before school. He has named them both, which I have gently pointed out makes it harder if anything happens to them. And he has gently pointed out that he doesn't care. Sarah asked me once, months later, lying in the dark, whether I was angry. I thought about it for a long time before I answered. I said, I was. I'm not sure I am anymore. She asked what I was instead. I said I wasn't sure there was a word for it. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, awake maybe. Yeah, I said, something like that. The sparrows were singing in the barn-red birdhouse on a Saturday morning when I stood at the kitchen window with my coffee, finally hot, finally finished, and watched Marcus run across the yard in his oversized cleats, waving his arms at something only he could see. The same Saturday morning light, the same hydrangea bushes, the same street. Different, though. Everything a little different. I drank my coffee. It didn't taste the way it used to taste. It tasted better.